Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial tech entrepreneur, a guy who's launched 30 companies, had 20 of those fail, but 10 of those I scaled to success. I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book. It's called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people that failure is not a bad thing. And failure means you're taking risks, you're pushing yourself. And as long as you could turn failure in your biggest competitive advantage, you're going to be unstoppable. And I also talk about how custom software always played a key defining role in every win I've had with companies. Now I'm the CEO of Sonotify Technology. We're a US-based software engineering firm that employs US and LATAM-based engineers. We help scale existing engineering teams. And today I am joined by Evan Shai. Evan has been an entrepreneur, a multi-time CEO, currently a Chicago guy. Evan, welcome to the show.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate being here. Certainly resonate with that opening as well. I think failure is a critical part of the growth journey of any company and certainly entrepreneur running it. So
when you win, when you have your wins, you get cocky and you don't always, you're just like, oh, I'm unstoppable. But when you have a failure, the way you analyze it, I wish there was a better way to learn. But it is what it is, right? So tell us about, your journey of your career and how you've, evolved into the CEO of HTD Talent.
Sure. Yeah. So similarly, it sounds like I've been an entrepreneur my entire career, for better or worse. Certainly a lot of lessons learned and scars to prove it along that journey. Spent the past several years on the other side of the table investing in early stage companies. So like pre-seed, seed, Series A companies, everything from software, of course, to robotics companies like Figure AI and even some quantum companies as well. And fortunately, got to see, again, both sides of the equation across a large aperture of different types of ventures, right? And it was nice learning from other people's failures and successes and not always being the one worrying about payroll every day and all that good stuff. Again, throughout that journey, I've certainly learned a lot across leadership, fundraising, bridging capability gaps in markets that are constantly shifting and changing. And what ultimately led me to the role I'm in now was seeing the gap that seems to be widening across companies of varying sizes, both small to larger enterprises. And the gap being the distance between like what they wanted to accomplish, their roadmap effectively, and the capabilities that their teams actually had in order to execute against it. With more companies kind of needing these new capabilities to execute on their plans, and the most economically valuable of those capabilities, AI and the kind of underlying requirements therein, it became clear that there was an opportunity to leverage some of the things that we've learned throughout my journey here and seeing what had been done across the companies that we're now leading, HTD Talent, Coding Temple, and App Academy. It was clear that there was a playbook to help companies address some of those things. So the operator was pulling me back into the CEO seat, started evaluating opportunities, both portfolio companies that we were investing in, as well as companies outside of our portfolio. This was a company that was outside of our portfolio, and it seemed like a very good opportunity to jump back in the ring and start addressing this really big challenge. It's been a cool journey so far.
Well, you're too young and have way too much fire to just sit back and be an investor and first rolling your sleeves up as an operator. Tell us more about HTD Talent and the group of companies.
Yeah, sure. So, really, again, as I was alluding to, we're trying to bridge the kind of execution gap that companies are facing by ensuring that they have the capabilities that they need to execute faster. Ultimately, we do that in two ways. We can help them by providing them new talent with the capabilities that they need, or we can help level up the people that they have internally already with those capabilities. And we do that, a couple of different ways. We have some methodology that we've been honing in on over the past decade, and we do it across larger enterprises generally, Fortune 500 banks and financial services companies. But we kind of roll up our sleeves, get in there, work with their teams. We end up embedding some expert personnel with those teams to help kind of level them up as they are executing against the roadmap.
Now, so you've been a serial entrepreneur, an investor. You've recently kind of had a roll up of your companies. Coding Temple. Talk about that, which I know it's now all been rolled up to HTD, but talk about Coding Temple and App Academy, and why you rolled those up into the current company.
Yeah, so Coding Temple and App Academy, across those two brands, really they've been the premier brands on the consumer side of the business, really in the tech bootcamp space. So the last time we had a tech wave and companies were needing a lot of technical talent in order to scale and execute the roadmap, bootcamps tended to be a really fast and effective way of providing that talent. And both companies were able to do that really well. Top ranked providers, training a couple thousand people a year. And so I came on board at Coding Temple, and we ended up identifying a private equity company who's a premier private equity company in the space, really is mission driven around what we're trying to do and trying to bridge this capability gap that we're all see kind of looming with AI. We partnered, we were able to acquire App Academy, rolled that into Coding Temple, and then HTD Talent was the enterprise side of the business, had really strong tech aug and staffing relationships with large financial services companies. So together, we now have capabilities on the consumer side of things where we're training thousands of people every year, really high quality training across a lot of different skills, cyber, software, data, QA, and AI. And then we have these enterprise relationships where we can make the best of that talent available for those companies. So it's really a symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
So there's a big problem in the marketplace right now that universities and their computer science degrees, they can't get over the internal politics of ethics of using AI. And on the flip side, no company wants to hire an engineer that's not trained in how to be more productive in AI. So there's a real problem out there. And one of the previous guests I had was the CIO of University of Texas. He also led their computer science. And he's like, companies are screaming at us like, we don't have anything to do for recent computer science graduates if they don't know how to use AI. And do you guys help bridge that gap? Because the universities aren't stepping up.
Yeah, look, I think we've bridged a lot of gaps that universities have generally not been able to move fast enough with the market in order to satisfy. So generally speaking, our model has been particularly agile. To directly answer your question, yes. As far as we're concerned, across all of the pathways that we have, again, cyber, data, software engineering, QA, et cetera, all of that needs to exist within a world of AI. So everyone going through our programs, independent of where they fall on the capability spectrum, if you will, from kind of entry, early career to mid-level experienced talent, they need to know how to do their role and amplify their efficacy with AI, right? And need to know how to operate in that space. So that is a core part of what we help people with.
It drives me nuts that the universities are having such a problem evolving. Because, all right, you could say it was a fad, but it's here to stay. And everybody in every role needs to learn it to be more productive, and especially engineering, because a lot of what AI can do in the software engineering world is replacing those entry-level roles and a lot of the things they do. So it's frustrating. We got to smack some people around. And a lot of times I see recent computer science graduates where they're getting jobs is on government, state, and federal type accounts where they're not allowed to use AI at all, and they're not getting any training in it. And I'm telling them, nights, weekends, you need to be playing with every AI tool. You need to be creating your own products. You can't let that go. And sometimes young people are stubborn, and they don't like to listen to us old guys who have the bruises. And it's where the industry is going.
There's no doubt about it. We are seeing a platform shift here. If you were refusing to embrace the internet or the applications that got developed later on, the app ecosystem, you'd be very, very far behind. And I think similarly here, if you are making the conscious decision not to expose yourself to these tools and learn how to leverage these tools to create more value, I think that's a big mistake for sure.
So tell us about some cutting edge and exciting projects you guys are working on now.
Yeah, so we're doing a number of things, and I would encourage probably most companies to think about it. It could be probably bifurcated in this way. I think there are both the use cases or applications of AI internally to make operations more efficient or to amplify the efficacy of individual roles, and ways outside the organization to create more value for customers. Where our business sits ultimately, of course, there are intuitive ways of going about both of those things, and maybe they're related. But, for us, there are a lot of things that we can do internally that used to require, a lot of people spending a lot of time doing very kind of rote, memorization based tasks, whether that was grading or providing feedback for candidates. A lot of that can be leveraged with AI, and in fact done better in some cases, certainly at scale. And it's not just about replacing the humans doing that work. Those humans can now do higher leverage work and create more value for customers ultimately. For customers specifically, there are both implications of what I just described about them being able to move through the experience faster as well. But even, specifically when we're talking about enterprises and our ability to go in and do diagnostic assessments effectively, whereas historically that might have required a lot of interviews and surveys and conversations. Now we can have them interact and engage with AI, conversational AI effectively, both video as well as chat, and help us with that diagnostic part, help us assess and understand where people currently are and where can we intervene to move the needle for that organization. So I think both those are two cool things that we're excited about what we can do.
So prior to the show, we were talking about some of the challenges you're facing, and as you're just completed a post-acquisition roll-up, talk about that and some challenges you're going through there.
Yeah, look, I've done kind of every flavor of entrepreneurship. I did a lot of bootstrapping in the beginning of my career, and of course there are big positives with that, really wide aperture of what you can call success, because you haven't diluted your ownership.
Yes.
But there's also, you're working on your own a lot, and you don't have the kind of support ecosystem around you, and it can take a long time. I've done the venture path, right, which has its pluses and minuses. And then, as you just alluded to, now we have, private equity partners. I think, again, there are strengths and limitations with each of those varieties. Myself as a CEO, I think I tend to naturally gravitate towards the latter. There's something in terms of a shared kind of understanding of the world and how we think about building a business that I think I can relate to with private equity, where it's not the same as venture, where it's kind of growth at all costs, burn a lot, just, grow. With PE, there's kind of core, fundamentals that are required. Let's grow the business profitably. Let's identify new markets to expand, but do that in ways where there are, meaningful barriers to entry, and you can deliver a lot of customer value. So I think there's been a lot of alignment there, and there's also a lot of interesting and more involved kind of support that a private equity firm generally provides. Now, maybe for some operators that might not be a great thing. I'm a learner on a daily basis. I'm constantly trying to grow. So if there's really smart, incredible people I can have near me and kind of leverage their experience and expertise, that's been a good thing for me.
Gotcha. What are some brutal lessons you've learned throughout your career? And I love it. You mentioned one pre-show about it's all about the people, stupid. Talk about that.
Oh, I love it.
You had it in quotes.
I am sure you've learned, a comparable lesson one way or the other. But for me, probably the biggest lesson I've learned a thousand times over is really the night and day difference between A and B talent. And the danger of letting kind of B and C talent kind of manifest and perpetuate in an organization. And I think as you move up the org chart, that becomes even more, apparent. A players to me, they don't just, outperform, they can multiply impact. I mean, especially if you're talking about sales or tech or marketing, an A player can, create 10 to 25 times the value of an average player in the same role. But ironically, and this is something I have struggled with for sure, especially earlier in my career, and a lot of other founders do, I've seen, we can hesitate when it comes to paying an A player 2 or 3 times more, right? And I think the logic obviously breaks there. If someone can deliver 10x the results and value, that's actually a bargain paying them more. I think we still have to operate within the constraints of running a business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an important lesson learned that it's worth investing in really high quality people and doing it fast and getting them on the bus fast and getting the wrong people off the bus fast. I think that's one kind of objective clarity that private equity environment can really help you hone in on, and keeping those standards really, really high, and having a framework and system to identify who those people are and know what excellence looks like and bring them on board in the right way.
Very good. What are some of the biggest business or technical outcomes you're focused on for the remainder of the year?
Well, yeah, for us, we have a product that really we're excited about, and we're starting to work with some mid-market and enterprises with, and it's called guided development. And guided development basically it breaks down in trying to help teams level up their teams without having to kind of spend time away for learning. So what we ultimately do is we break this down into a dive framework. We do a diagnosis of understanding kind of where the baselines of that team currently are, what it is that they're trying to achieve, what are the things on their roadmap that require capabilities that their team currently doesn't have, and are those capabilities, they could be technical, they could be methodology. And then we embed experts into their team, right into the flow of work, and help that team ship or execute against that roadmap while leveling them up in the process. So it basically allows them to continue delivering and shipping against the roadmap while building up capability at the same time. So we want to see that really start to gain traction with some of our larger companies and some new companies as well.
Who's the ideal client for that? Is that very large companies with hundreds, if not thousands of engineers? Is that smaller companies with 5 to 20 engineers?
Yeah, good question. It is certainly like larger companies, but it could be mid-market companies. Teams of 50 or 100 it would be probably on the lower end. But generally, we really thrive in highly regulated industries. So banking, financial services, those are really our bread and butter. And kind of the whole system has been created around recognizing the constraints that exist in those environments. So that's been kind of our core customers.
Gotcha. So what are the biggest challenges or things standing in your way to reaching those goals by end of year?
Yeah. Look, I think we're making a lot of progress. We are definitely a learning organization, but I think a lot of companies out there, presumably, are finding themselves in an environment that is changing rapidly. So I think making long-term investments when the ground is constantly shifting can be challenging. As I said earlier, I mean, we're in the middle of a platform shift, and it's not super obvious where value is going to accrue next. I think the challenge is how do you stay aggressive without just kind of investing blind? So for us, that's we're focusing on the things that we don't believe will change. The first principle is that we have high conviction over, and ensure that we are building capabilities internally and a war chest of capital. So when the opportunities do show up, we can move with speed and precision and kind of zero hesitation. So it's not really about chasing everything. It's about being ready when the right bet is worth making.
So, generative AI has certainly changed the game in many senses as it's come across over the past now almost 3 years. I think that it put everybody in the tech space kind of in paralyzed mode of, well, wait a minute, are we going to need software engineers? Are we not? Well, how is AI going to shift things in our world? And MIT had an interesting report that they put out in August of 95% of generative AI pilots at companies were failing, meaning zero or negative ROI for the company. What's your take on all this?
Great question. I think, I spent some time in a PhD lab, so spent a lot of time like reading research and science. And I think context matters for sure. And, so for instance, if there are a lot more pilots and projects being launched, ultimately, the absolute number of successful pilots is actually growing, but as a percentage of the total might look like a small number, relative to all the projects being released. I think ultimately, again, we're in the early phases of a platform shift. So everyone's still trying to figure out what value looks like. How do we measure value ultimately? And sometimes, although I'm someone who deeply believes in the ability to define success clearly and measure that success, sometimes just because you can't measure it doesn't mean it's not important and impactful. And I think there's kind of a lot of that, currently right now. In terms of the impact that it has on our workforces, I think we have generally, historically, hired for skills, even specialists, if you will. And I think today what AI is probably already doing, and certainly we're seeing this, one person can do the work of 3 different functions, right? So you're not waiting for a copywriter or even a front-end developer in some cases. You can use AI, you can scope it out, prototype it, and ship it and much quicker than you were able to before. So I think that comes with expectations expanding of what people should be expected to do within specific roles. But I think that's what the change will be. The roles for individual functions will change and expand in a lot of ways. But I think this can be an amplifier, not just a replacement of engineers, if you will.
I agree. And, when Elon Musk bought Twitter and fired 80% of the company, and Mark Zuckerberg of Meta said he'll be able to cut 60% of his engineering team due to AI, and kind of fast forward, I think there's this realization of where it can help, that it's not replacing. And we're a software technology show, so we're talking about software engineering, and it is shifting some of the roles. And we've certainly seen where we might have needed to have a team of 8 engineers that we can do it with 6. We've definitely seen that. It's changed the game completely on producing quick prototypes, as opposed to spending hundreds of millions of dollars on MVPs, where you can get stuff up quickly. But you agree, disagree?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, we do this, like our experimental loop and our learning loops have, been transformed in terms of timeline. However, to actually ship those things into the real world in a meaningful way, in a high quality kind of software driven experience, there's a lot to be desired still. And I think there's still a huge advantage and a lot of leverage of having really strong technical talent in your organization, especially if that's what makes your beer taste better, right? If that's what your product is ultimately, is the software that you're delivering to customers. I think we are a ways away from replacing the technical folks who are driving
Yeah,
that
doing some
experience.
vibe coding, creating something really cool quick. That's MVP, that's prototype, but that doesn't scale. But it helps move ideas quicker, faster, better. But
Exactly.
you still need that core engineering team to build that out so it can scale and be secure and truly adapt to the users.
Totally. And to your point earlier in the conversation, it certainly can make failure a lot less expensive. I mean, we used to have to build software and ship that into the world, and all the expenses and investment that was required to get there. Now you can just, put a prototype into the world and get some learnings fast.
No doubt. Evan,
Yeah.
thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You bring a great, unique perspective with your entrepreneurial, your investing background, your multi-time CEO background. Before we wrap, what's some no BS advice you have out there for tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or just survive in these interesting times?
I guess we covered the talent and the willingness to invest in talent. I'm assuming, especially if you have founders out there, I think there's one kind of important, truth that I've realized, and being someone who works really hard and knows that hard work is a critical part of the journey. I also have seen across a lot of different experiences that hard work in a bad business or a bad product won't save you. It might delay failure, but it ultimately will prevent you from actually achieving escape velocity. So I think importantly, as product leaders out there, tech leaders out there that are trying to find new paths for growth or new product opportunities, make sure that the kind of fundamental economics of the products that you're shipping are there and they're sound and exciting before investing too heavily into any given pathway. To our point before, I think there are a lot of ways to test different ideas and products in low cost, high velocity ways. I would encourage everyone to leverage those tools and that new capability in order to ultimately increase the probability of success.
Great advice. Evan, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your insights. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, kiss my butt. We'll go share it with your competitors, give them the edge they need. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.